Hey guys, tonight we're diving headfirst into the absurdly sweaty, bug-covered, chaos-ridden world of our earliest ancestors. Because apparently, humans have always had a flair for dramatic mornings and questionable life choices. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, comment your location and what time it is there, because why not see if anyone else is awake while we dissect prehistoric panic. Now settle in and get comfortable, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. At the break of the earliest imaginable dawn, humans emerged from their scrappy shelters, blinking against the first violent rays of sunlight like caffeinated teenagers forced into gym class. The sky glowed pink and orange, smugly showing off while everyone else suffered, and somewhere, a particularly loud bird, or maybe it was just a branch falling, reminded them that the world had zero chill. There was no snooze button, no cozy blankets, just the harsh reality of gravity, cold air, and the existential terror of another day spent trying not to starve, get eaten, or both simultaneously. Some humans stretched in ways that probably made the nearest tree laugh, joints popping like over-enthusiastic popcorn, while others muttered incoherent grunts that served as a kind of early morning venting ritual. Breakfast was still a mystery, and even the thought of finding food could provoke full-blown panic. The ones lucky enough to find remnants from the previous day's scavenging stared into the distance, wondering if roots really counted as a balanced diet, or if they'd be gnawing on a random bug with dignity, or lack thereof. The early sun seemed to taunt them, rising relentlessly as if saying, "Yeah, good luck today, loser." No one had coffee, obviously, so energy levels oscillated between sluggish despair and sudden bursts of adrenaline whenever a rustle suggested that maybe, just maybe, something worth hunting was nearby. Or maybe it was just the wind messing with their already fragile nerves. Humans learned quickly that mornings were a test of resilience, dodging errant insects, avoiding stubbed toes on rocks and roots, and navigating social friction that started the moment someone claimed, without proof, "I saw that berry patch first." They moved with an odd mixture of careful calculation and chaotic improvisation, balancing the urge to survive with the desire not to look like a total fool in front of the rest of the tribe. As they adjusted to daylight, senses heightened. Every sound carried the weight of potential disaster, and every shadow suggested imminent betrayal by a predator or rival human. The day had barely begun, yet the mental load was already crushing, setting a rhythm that was equal parts panic, strategy, and low-key existential dread, all flavored with the sarcastic irony that their biggest enemy might just be their own overcooked early morning enthusiasm. And somewhere, despite the chaos, a human somewhere probably thought, "Wow, maybe tomorrow I'll sleep in, but probably not." Limbs flailed like clumsy puppets in the cool, unforgiving air as early humans attempted to wake their bodies without throwing out a shoulder or groaning loudly enough to summon predators, because, apparently, subtlety wasn't invented yet. Every joint creaked with the enthusiasm of an old floorboard, and backs complained like they were filing formal grievances, while toes, stubbed against rocks and roots, provided the kind of sharp, immediate feedback that could double as early human alarm clocks. Some humans rolled onto the ground, twisting and bending in ways that were probably impressive if anyone had the luxury to notice, but mostly just looked like interpretive dance gone terribly wrong. They stretched, yawned, and swore silently at gravity, which seemed determined to remind them that evolution was apparently done with hand-holding. The air smelled faintly of smoke from yesterday's embers, mud, and whatever the group had stepped in during last night's scramble for warmth, which, combined with the occasional grunt from a particularly uncooperative neighbor, made mornings both physically uncomfortable and socially awkward. Posture mattered, or at least pretending it did. because every eye in the tribe could judge, silently or otherwise, how strong or lazy someone was, and bragging about surviving the night without being eaten had become a subtle flex. Some humans attempted elaborate stretching routines that seemed half yoga, half ritualistic apology to their own muscles, as if saying, "Please forgive me, knees, for what we did yesterday." Others skipped the theatrics and just hunched over in silent misery, shivering and muttering, which somehow also earned respect because suffering in silence had always had that cool factor, even before Instagram. Muscles woke reluctantly, and the collective internal debate about whether the day would be a thrilling adventure or a slow-motion tragedy raged on. Even breathing became strategic. Deep inhales reminded humans of life, while cautious exhales calculated the probability of encountering a sudden problem. And yet, despite the discomfort, there was an unspoken camaraderie in shared agony, the kind that only arises when everyone is simultaneously negotiating their own physical limits while silently judging their neighbor's flexibility or lack thereof. Limbs warmed, grunts became less frequent, and humans edged closer to functional, though still wary existence, all the while wondering if perhaps stretching too much might just summon some unseen cosmic punishment for showing off. By the time the sun fully asserted itself, the tribe had settled into a rhythm somewhere between cautious mobility and semi-panic, bodies reluctantly cooperating with minds still half convinced that the world was about to throw a new, horrible surprise at them. The irony, of course, was that most of the threats that truly mattered, the hunt, the fire, the unpredictable weather, had yet to arrive, and humans were already exhausted from the simple act of existing. Early humans approached the morning meal with the kind of tense anticipation usually reserved for lottery drawings or online dating swipes, because breakfast had the delightful uncertainty of, will this taste like survival or regret? Roots, tubers, and whatever conveniently squirmed on the ground were fair game, and it was entirely possible to chew enthusiastically only to discover that your chosen snack was more bitter, fibrous, or aggressively crunchy than expected. Bugs, of course, made frequent cameo appearances. Some were celebrated as protein bombs, others as accidental flavor enhancers, in the "oops, I just swallowed a cricket" category. Chewing was a delicate art form, not too slow to attract attention from predators, not too fast to choke, and ideally performed with the dignity of someone who definitely knew what they were doing. Humans had little concept of cooking at this point, beyond maybe panicking near embers, so texture was king, flavor was negotiable, and surprise elements were the main course. Conversations during breakfast were chaotic and half-lucid, often devolving into debates over which root belonged to whom, or whispered accusations that someone had stolen a particularly plump grub while no one was looking. The social tension paired with the hunger-induced desperation created a culinary theater where every bite carried a subtle performance of patience, cunning, and bravado. Some humans nibbled cautiously, testing for poison or unwanted crunch, while others inhaled with abandon, setting the bar for reckless survival. Smells were potent, earthy, pungent, occasionally rotting, and sometimes oddly aromatic if the stars aligned, which they almost never did. Meanwhile, the ever-present sun continued to assert itself like a judgmental roommate, highlighting every smudge, spill, and ungraceful crunch for all to witness. There was strategy involved. The faster one ate, the more likely they were to claim the remaining edible bits. The slower, more contemplative eater risked starvation or judgment, but could at least savor the fleeting sense of sophistication that comes with meticulous chewing. Occasionally, a particularly unlucky human discovered a root or insect that triggered immediate regret, spitting, gagging, and muttered oaths punctuated the communal meal like low-budget sound effects. Breakfast thus became less about nourishment and more about psychological warfare, survival math, and minor ego checks, all flavored with that unmistakable early human seasoning of fear, social comparison, and a dash of, "Why is my life like this?" Even the triumph of finding a delicious morsel was tempered by the ever-looming awareness that this precarious victory might be fleeting, as a bigger, hungrier neighbor could claim it at any second, leaving one with nothing but the shame of desperation. It was, in short, a breakfast experience that demanded resilience, quick reflexes, and the ability to laugh at one's own misfortune, even if that laughter was more of a pained groan. And so, each day began with the dual joys of nourishment and performance anxiety, a high-stakes game of edible roulette that set the tone for the absurdly demanding, unpredictable, and often hilarious grind of early human life. In the smoldering aftermath of breakfast chaos, early humans faced their next high-stakes challenge, fire, which was basically the VIP club of survival skills, and not everyone got in. Someone who could strike a spark earned instant social cred, while everyone else hovered nearby, half impressed, half jealous, and fully aware that, without fire, your day might involve raw roots, frozen toes, and existential panic. Sparks were precious, tiny harbingers of safety and warmth, and watching someone else conjure flame could induce an awkward combination of admiration, envy, and low-key self-loathing. There was strategy involved, naturally. Do you hover quietly and hope to learn without embarrassing yourself? Or do you loudly critique while secretly being totally useless, which seemed to be a popular tactic? Fingers got scorched, patience evaporated, and a cloud of smoke often lingered in ways that made everyone's eyes water, noses run, and egos flare. A failed attempt at rubbing sticks together didn't just end in frustration. It became a subtle, unspoken public trial, a reminder that evolution had a dark sense of humor and zero tolerance for overconfidence. Those who succeeded basked in the smug glow of literal flame, narrating their own prowess with gestures, nods, and the occasional triumphant grunt, while others tried to mask their incompetence behind feigned interest or exaggerated coughing. Fire was also a sensory extravaganza, crackling, smoking, warm, and intimidating all at once, a tiny chaotic orb of power that could keep predators at bay, cook meat, and maybe even spark the envy of a rival human, or worse, a family member who'd been watching all along. The process demanded patience, skill, and a surprising amount of stubbornness, because unlike berries or bugs, fire didn't just appear with a polite request. It required attention, care, and a willingness to risk minor burns, which somehow translated into social clout and bragging rights, because apparently early humans were already obsessed with status and not just survival. Once the flame caught, rituals of maintenance began, blowing, poking, shielding, and occasionally whispering motivational chants, because apparently fire was temperamental and could sense disrespect. Stories, jokes, and subtle digs circulated around the fire, highlighting who had failed spectacularly the day before, who might fail today, and who was now officially that human who actually knows things. Fire, in this context, was less a tool and more a social amplifier, a way to claim authority, assert competence, and flex quietly while everyone else hovered somewhere between awe and passive-aggressive irritation. By mid-morning, humans had learned a universal truth. Fire wasn't just heat. It was survival theater, ego therapy, and a dramatic reminder that skill was currency, luck was optional, and the rest of the tribe was watching, judging, and silently plotting to steal your glow at the first opportunity. Once the fire was grudgingly tamed and the smoke had stopped making everyone cough like malfunctioning dragons, early humans turned their attention to tools, which were less helpful gadgets and more tiny sticks and stones that could either save your life or give you a new permanent scar. Crafting them was a full contact experience. Jagged edges threatened fingers, awkward angles invited bruises, and yet somehow the satisfaction of holding something sharper than a fingernail outweighed all the minor injuries. The process involved trial, error, and occasional screams because apparently evolution hadn't yet included pain tolerance for amateurs. Every stick could be a spear, every stone a hammer, and every failed experiment a dramatic lesson in humility. Socially, tool making was a performance. A human who shaped a sharp point or smooth handle instantly gained prestige, while the clumsy ones stumbled, cut themselves, or cracked a rock over their own toe, prompting whispered snickers from the rest of the tribe. Pride and survival were weirdly intertwined. A well-made tool could mean dinner, protection, or at least not looking like a complete failure in front of everyone else. Humans often debated technique, gesturing wildly and making sounds that were basically early arguments because no one had invented polite conversation yet. Tools became extensions of the self, a symbol of ingenuity and the subtle thrill of superiority, especially when someone else's creation broke or failed spectacularly. Crafting took patience, grinding, chipping, shaping, but impatience often won, resulting in oddly shaped, borderline dangerous creations that someone had to test out, usually by accident. Nature didn't forgive mistakes either. A misplaced swing could smash a foot, dent a rock, or scare off potential prey, making every session a combination of DIY and high-stakes life lesson. And yet, humans persisted, mostly because the alternatives, getting eaten, freezing, or starving, were worse than minor lacerations or bruised egos. Creativity became competitive. Someone would invent a slightly better point or flatter handle and silently collect the kudos while everyone else scrambled to copy or improve it, sometimes resulting in a sort of prehistoric workshop vibe, minus the soothing music or Pinterest tutorials. There was judgment, admiration, and subtle sabotage, all wrapped into one sweaty, dusty session of trial and error. Even the choice of materials mattered, a sturdy rock versus a soft one, a flexible stick versus one that snapped instantly, each decision carrying a mix of practical consequences and social weight. By the end of the morning, humans had transformed raw chaos into marginally functional tools, their hands scratched, their egos pricked, and their minds buzzing with a mix of pride, irritation, and quiet relief that at least one part of the day now made them feel like competent creatures rather than entirely hapless beings. By mid-morning, thirst became the subtle, nagging villain of the day, pulling humans towards streams and rivers with the kind of desperation that made careful planning optional and mild panic mandatory. Streams weren't just convenient. They were chaotic, unpredictable, and occasionally aggressive, like nature's way of reminding humans that hydration required skill, strategy, and the ability to balance dignity with practicality. Some humans approached cautiously, toe-testing the water like it might bite, while others plunged hands in with reckless enthusiasm, sending up splashes that drew both approval and eye rolls from the more socially conscious observers. The flow was deceptive, calm on the surface, furious underneath, and full of slippery rocks, snapping twigs, and mysterious shapes that provoked shrieks and dramatic leaps backward, as if the river itself had a sense of humor. Drinking was another delicate performance. Bending over gracefully was optional, but avoiding muddy sips, accidental swallowing of tadpoles, or being splashed by an inconsiderate neighbor was crucial for social credibility. Some humans experimented with inventive techniques, cupping hands, using leaves, or improvising tiny bowls from bark, which often ended in spills, soggy knees, and muted glares from the water-efficient elite. Streams also doubled as social hubs, providing opportunities for gossip, judgment, and low-key competition over who could fetch water the fastest without tripping, falling, or looking utterly foolish. Predators lurked nearby too, not to mention the ever-present risk of slipping and ruining the only clean pair of feet anyone vaguely owned, making hydration a surprisingly high-stakes enterprise. The act of simply getting water demanded attention, strategy, and a willingness to suffer minor indignities like soaking your pants or flailing dramatically when a particularly slippery rock betrayed your trust. Humans learned, quickly and painfully, that streams were both lifeline and trap, a place where survival instincts collided with social performance in a wet, slippery spectacle. Even the sounds, the gurgling, splashing, and occasional shriek created an unpredictable soundtrack of tension, signaling that nothing about drinking was simple, safe, or dignified. By the time hydration was achieved, humans felt a tentative pride mixed with relief and embarrassment, aware that every stumble or spill had been observed, mentally catalogued, and silently judged. The ritual, repetitive, and slightly humiliating reinforced that water was not merely a resource, but a social arena, a mini-test of coordination, endurance, and composure. By the time early humans retreated from the stream, dripping, muddy, and oddly exhilarated, they carried with them a renewed sense of survival, awareness, and subtle superiority, at least until the next challenge arrived. The lesson was clear. Water ran, humans ran with it, and dignity was negotiable but optional, mostly depending on whether you fell in face first or gracefully. Once basic hydration was secured, attention turned to hunting, which was less practical necessity and more full-contact cardio with a side of ego. Early humans stalked animals with a combination of careful observation and reckless enthusiasm, because nothing screamed competence like sprinting after a creature that was equally motivated to avoid becoming dinner. Pride played a surprisingly heavy role. A human who managed even a near miss with a deer or wild boar earned silent respect, while someone who tripped on a root or misjudged a spear throw instantly became the subject of low-key ridicule, whispered jokes, and exaggerated eye rolls. The hunt itself was a chaotic ballet of crouching, lunging, flailing, and panicked improvisation, as humans attempted to synchronize strategy without formal training, coaching, or decent footwear. Some humans became the scouts, using stealth and patience like it was a competitive sport, while others charged forward with the confidence of someone who hadn't realized that the animal probably had better cardio and significantly more survival experience. Coordination was a mix of signals, gestures, and occasional loud, unnecessary commentary, because apparently effective communication could wait when adrenaline demanded flair. The animals themselves were unpredictable co-stars in this prehistoric theater, sometimes clever, sometimes panicked, often forcing humans into embarrassing flops, misfires, or dramatic tumbles that would be catalogued for future gossip. Every misstep carried potential consequences, from bruises and scrapes to lost prey, and yet there was an undeniable thrill in the chase, a mixture of fear, adrenaline, and satisfaction that even failed attempts provided useful bragging rights. Tracking skills were honed through trial, error, and relentless observation. Footprints, broken twigs, rustling in the underbrush, and the occasional accidental scaring of the quarry required quick thinking and constant awareness. Humans quickly learned that patience was a weapon as valuable as speed. Crouching silently for minutes at a time often yielded better results than reckless sprinting, though the latter was far more socially impressive if executed without total disaster. By the time an animal was cornered or killed, the group often looked simultaneously exhausted, exhilarated, and slightly embarrassed by the minor disasters that had unfolded en route. Meat was the reward, yes, but the performance, the chase, the near fails, the improvisation was equally valuable, reinforcing social hierarchies, respect, and subtle power dynamics. Everyone measured competence not just in skill, but in composure, creativity, and the ability to recover from humiliation, because survival was brutal, but so was pride. And of course, humans learned that sometimes the animal outsmarted them entirely, leaving them panting, muddy, and narratively defeated, which only made the next attempt even more important, dramatic, and ego-fueled. The hunt, in short, was less about dinner and more about proving that you were both daring and marginally competent. A delicate balance of fear, cunning, and social theater that defined early human mornings long before they earned the right to eat. After the exhausting chase, early humans faced the next level dilemma: what to do with the unlucky creature that had just failed spectacularly to escape dinner. The moment of truth was a chaotic blend of triumph, terror, and existential questioning, because staring down raw meat with sharp edges and no real culinary guidance was somehow simultaneously thrilling and horrifying. Decisions had to be made quickly: eat it raw, which was fast but slightly reckless, or wrestle with embers and sticks to cook it, risking burns, smoke inhalation, and dramatic failure in front of the whole tribe. Arguments erupted immediately over technique and priorities, a mix of hand gestures, pointed looks, and semi-coherent grunts, each person silently insisting that their method was obviously the superior one, because apparently confidence could temporarily substitute for skill. The less competent humans hovered nearby, either offering useless advice or trying to subtly steal the best bits, while the most confident wielded sharp stones or sticks with a mixture of authority and nervousness, because nobody wanted to be the first casualty of overambition. Cooking was a messy, smoky business. Embers refused to cooperate, fire flared up unpredictably, and grease or fat often ignited in ways that produced panicked leaps and occasional singed eyebrows, adding a bit of slapstick to survival. Even eating raw meat required strategy, chewing efficiently, avoiding bones, and suppressing gag reflexes became a delicate balance of physiology and social performance. The social hierarchy revealed itself quickly. Those who successfully prepared or portioned the meal earned bragging rights, subtle nods of approval, and the first choice of tender pieces, while the less skilled endured side-eye, whispered critiques, and the occasional eye roll so pronounced it might have been evolutionary communication for, "You clearly have no idea what you're doing." Meanwhile, smells and textures were intensely distracting. Raw blood, earthy fat, and the occasional accidental crunch of an unexpected bone provided constant sensory feedback which, combined with nerves and pride, created a kind of culinary theater that was terrifying and fascinating in equal measure. By the time everyone finally ate, humans were sticky, smoky, slightly panicked, and filled with a mix of satisfaction and relief, realizing that survival sometimes required improvisation, courage, and a high tolerance for chaos. Some individuals immediately bragged, gesturing to the fire and the meat like they had invented both, while others quietly nursed bruised egos and minor burns, plotting their redemption for the next hunt. The process reinforced social bonds, hierarchies, and the subtle understanding that food was more than sustenance. It was status, skill, and evidence of one's ability to navigate the absurdly dangerous, dramatically unpredictable world they had inherited. Even the smallest misstep could provoke shame, laughter, or whispered mockery, creating an environment where survival and performance were inseparably tangled, and every meal was simultaneously a triumph, a spectacle, and a minor disaster waiting to happen. While some humans wrestled with meat, others drifted toward the safer, if slightly less glamorous, pursuit of gathering, which was essentially the ancient equivalent of a social networking event disguised as survival. Berry bushes, roots, nuts, and edible leaves were targeted not just for calories, but for bragging rights, because apparently the size, quantity, and quality of what you collected translated directly into social clout. Humans flitted from bush to bush with varying degrees of competence. Some moved with the precision of someone who had memorized the optimal picking strategy, while others poked aimlessly, occasionally pricking themselves on thorns or discovering that what looked like a berry was actually some sad, bitter mutant that tasted like regret. Conversations, mostly grunts, gestures, and exaggerated sighs, filled the spaces between foraging, and subtle side-eye or overemphasized nods acted as early comment sections, evaluating performance, efficiency, and taste discrimination. A human who discovered a particularly juicy berry or a secret stash became an instant minor celebrity, subtly flexing their find, while the rest of the group attempted casual indifference, though everyone knew exactly how impressive the haul really was. Competition was low-key but constant, silently racing to find more or better items, occasionally pretending that a poor quality find was intentional or ironic, and strategically hoarding the best picks for maximum prestige. Accidental disasters, knocking over a patch, scaring off insects that might have been edible, or misjudging thorny branches, were met with dramatic sighs, small snickers, and sometimes full-blown mockery, all of which were excellent social exercises in patience, pride, and ego management. The terrain added extra spice. Uneven ground, hidden roots, and occasional mud patches ensured that even the simplest task could result in minor humiliation, like tripping into a puddle while holding a prized bundle of berries, giving onlookers something to gossip about for hours. Observation skills were essential, noticing which berries were ripe, which were poisonous, and which could be snatched before anyone else discovered them required sharp eyes, quick reflexes, and a willingness to subtly manipulate social dynamics. Humans began to associate success with more than just calories. The act of gathering became intertwined with storytelling, commentary, and subtle displays of competence. Whispers about someone's misjudged berry choice or exaggerated pride in a small find circulated like a low-budget news network, shaping perceptions and hierarchies. Even simple actions, carefully plucking a berry, avoiding thorns, or offering small gifts to allies, carried weight, reinforcing social cohesion, subtle alliances, and low-key rivalry. By mid-morning, humans had internalized the lesson that survival wasn't only about hunger, but about signaling skill, sharing resources, and collecting social capital, all while navigating the absurd, thorny, slippery, berry-filled landscape that made even mundane tasks a blend of strategy, minor humiliation, and low-level entertainment. After the chaos of hunting, cooking, and berry hoarding, a lull settled over early humans, inviting the risky and subtly complicated ritual of the mid-morning nap, a surprisingly political affair disguised as rest. Choosing where to recline involved more than comfort. Proximity to fire, distance from predators, and strategic positioning relative to the tribe's gossip hotspots all had to be weighed, and one wrong move could earn subtle but unmistakable judgment. Some humans sprawled recklessly, limbs splayed like over-enthusiastic puppets, trusting that their luck, skill, or sheer audacity would prevent them from being trampled, bitten, or shamed. Others approached napping with the precision of tactical planners, curling carefully in shaded spots, shielding themselves with sticks or leaves, and silently evaluating the choices of their neighbors, because nothing screams social competence like picking a nap zone that balances safety and subtle status signaling. Negotiations weren't verbalized. They rarely needed to be, but gestures, sighs, and exaggerated stretches communicated everything from mild envy to passive-aggressive disapproval. Humans often had to compromise between comfort and optics. A cozy spot by the fire could expose one to ridicule for hogging warmth, while a more isolated nook might be interpreted as laziness or cowardice. Even the act of closing one's eyes was fraught, too fast, and you looked over-eager to shirk responsibility. Too slow, and fatigue became a visible liability. Some humans engaged in quiet games of nap one-upmanship, subtly stretching, repositioning, or sighing in exaggerated relief, hoping to project both relaxation and superiority simultaneously. Meanwhile, external threats loomed, rustling leaves, distant predator calls, or overly enthusiastic neighbors threatened to interrupt delicate sleep cycles, reminding humans that even a siesta was precarious. The communal aspect of napping reinforced subtle hierarchies, the ability to rest without losing face, the skill to monitor surroundings while appearing relaxed, and the quick reflexes to react if danger approached became survival skills in their own right. Occasionally, disputes arose. Someone claimed a prime log or shaded patch, sparking silent power plays and dramatic repositioning, forcing others to adapt quickly while maintaining social composure. The nap, paradoxically, demanded as much strategic thinking as a hunt. Positioning, timing, duration, and social optics were all essential variables, and miscalculations could result in minor embarrassment, theft of prime sleeping spots, or worse, waking groggy and disoriented in front of the tribe. By the end of the morning nap window, humans emerged with slightly recharged energy, sharpened awareness, and a subtle appreciation for the delicate balance between personal comfort and social reputation. The lessons of rest were clear. Sleep was essential, but strategy and social finesse were equally vital, turning even the simplest act of closing one's eyes into a small battlefield of perception, judgment, and low-key psychological warfare. Once humans had reclaimed a few minutes of energy from their precarious naps, attention shifted to a surprisingly messy and oddly essential task: skincare, prehistoric edition. Mud, clay, and a suspiciously generous amount of dirt were the go-to tools, applied with equal parts desperation, experimentation, and low-key vanity, because apparently early humans were concerned about looking slightly less like walking nightmares, even if functionally they were still covered in sweat, grease, and whatever critters had decided to hitch a ride overnight. Application was chaotic. Smearing, rubbing, and flinging happened simultaneously, often resulting in one's face resembling a modern abstract painting, which likely impressed no one but did provoke laughter, side-eye, and dramatic commentary from nearby observers. The process wasn't purely aesthetic. Mud doubled as protection against the sun, insects, and minor scrapes, so each smudge had a practical function, even if the technique left something to be desired. Humans quickly learned that too little mud looked lazy, too much looked like they had lost a fight with a riverbank, and uneven coverage invited whispers, mockery, and subtle dominance displays. Fingers were sticky, faces streaked, and clothing, or whatever passed for primitive fabric, was inevitably coated in layers of gritty, dry grime, giving the tribe a uniform, if aesthetically questionable, appearance. Some individuals experimented with layering, combining dirt with crushed leaves, sap, or ash, creating early DIY beauty routines that may have worked in principle, but often left the user sticky, smelling faintly of smoke and regretting their creative choices. Interaction during this ritual became a social minefield. Offering advice could be interpreted as constructive, passive-aggressive, or outright insulting, depending on tone, gestures, and prior grudges. There was also the subtle hierarchy of who applied mud first, who had access to better materials, and who could casually make fun of someone while improving their own appearance, all without drawing retaliation. Observers practiced judgment and comparison. The thickness of application, smoothness of coverage, and creativity of additives served as informal metrics of skill, patience, and social awareness. Some humans even used this messy ritual to test cooperation, subtly applying mud to each other, creating both trust and annoyance in a delicate balance. The act reinforced social bonds while simultaneously feeding competitive instincts, because nothing quite says, "I am surviving," like smearing dirt with purpose while watching someone else struggle to achieve symmetry. By the time this mud-based self-care concluded, humans were grimy, sticky, and marginally protected from sunburn and bugs. But more importantly, they had reinforced social hierarchies, practiced subtle judgment, and perhaps even enjoyed a fleeting sense of creative satisfaction. It was, in short, both functional and performative, proving that even the simplest routines in early human life carried layers of absurdity, strategy, and unspoken social theater. Even after mud masks, early humans couldn't relax, because the world was a loud, unpredictable, and aggressively judgmental place where every rustle in the brush or snap of a twig could signal either dinner or death. Predator panic was an omnipresent soundtrack. Eyes flicked constantly, ears strained, and hearts raced over imagined threats as much as real ones, because the brain apparently had a subscription to anxiety long before calendars existed. Some humans developed a nervous hyper-awareness, twitching at every bird call or rustle, while others adopted a stoic approach, silently judging their panicked neighbors for audibly flinching at shadows. The jungle, savanna, or whatever messy landscape they inhabited was alive with movement, and humans learned to interpret subtle cues, broken branches, paw prints, low growls, and even oddly quiet patches of grass all demanded attention, strategy, and rapid decision-making. Social dynamics amplified the tension. A false alarm could earn laughter, whispered ridicule, or dramatic eye rolls, while a missed threat carried far more serious consequences. Humans practiced coordinated scanning, subtle signaling, and occasional look over there distractions to test awareness, all while balancing the internal debate of run now versus stay calm and look cool. Survival required constant vigilance, but paranoia could be performative. Showing awareness demonstrated competence, whereas excessive panicking suggested weakness and invited social judgment. Predators themselves were unpredictable. Lions, hyenas, wolves, or snakes could appear at any moment, making even mundane movements, picking berries, adjusting mud masks, or sharpening sticks, a potential audition for life or death improvisation. Humans learned subtle tricks, crouching behind foliage, keeping the fire nearby, or positioning themselves so that an approaching threat could be visually monitored without obvious panic, which doubled as a confidence flex. Group dynamics mattered intensely. Individuals who could spot danger first earned status, while those who ignored cues risked both physical harm and subtle shaming. Even early humans understood that paranoia was functional theater. It protected, entertained, and reinforced social hierarchies simultaneously. Small noises became dramatic, exaggerated, and dissected repeatedly. Was that a branch, or a stalking predator, or Tim tripping again? Each suspicion demanded preparation, readying spears, whispering warnings, and coordinating the tribe's subtle gestures, all while maintaining a semblance of calm. Over time, the constant stress honed instincts, sharpened attention, and turned even casual moments into micro battles of perception versus imagination. By late morning, humans had internalized that predator panic wasn't just survival, it was a full-time job, an immersive psychological sport, and a social stage where competence, fear, and drama coexisted, leaving the tribe simultaneously alert, exhausted, and slightly entertained by the absurd intensity of their own vigilance. As the morning's adrenaline ebbed, attention inevitably shifted from external threats to internal politics, because surviving predators was stressful enough, but surviving humans required a whole different skill set, and apparently ego battles predated organized leadership. Decision-making devolved into a subtle, messy mix of gestures, grunts, exaggerated sighs, and strategic eyebrow raises, where the loudest, most confident, or just plain stubborn individual often claimed temporary authority, whether deserved or not. Some humans attempted to assert dominance through physical presence, standing taller, waving sticks, or dramatically pointing at the horizon as if their vision for the day was divine, while others relied on cleverness, cooperation, or sheer stubbornness to subtly undermine rivals without sparking outright conflict. Arguments over hunting routes, water collection, sleeping spots, and even mud application erupted spontaneously, each a complex dance of logic, persuasion, and low-key posturing as everyone sought to carve out influence while maintaining social favor. Observers weighed every gesture, tone, and glance, silently calculating alliances, grudges, and opportunities to subtly flex superiority, proving that early human drama was as layered as modern reality TV, but with higher stakes and worse hygiene. Leadership claims were often contested in real time. Someone might loudly insist on a path toward a berry patch, while a rival countered with a pointing grunt, and the ensuing standoff required diplomacy, timing, and minor theatrics to avoid an escalation into chaos. Physical intimidation was paired with social maneuvering, blocking access to resources. Exaggerated sighs of disapproval and mock flinches at minor mistakes became tools to assert rank without immediate violence. Humor and sarcasm were weaponized too. Clever quips, exaggerated oops moments, or pointed gestures could subtly undermine an opponent, often eliciting laughter or awkward embarrassment, further influencing tribal hierarchies. Even small successes, like spotting prey first or fetching water efficiently, became leverage in ongoing power dynamics because competence translated to authority, trust, and subtle bragging rights. Coalition building emerged naturally. Temporary alliances formed around shared goals or mutual disdain for a particularly overconfident leader, creating intricate webs of loyalty, rivalry, and silent judgment. By midday, the tribe had settled into a tentative social order, with each human aware of their relative rank, strengths, and vulnerabilities, yet still poised for the next shift in hierarchy. The absurdity of the system was unmistakable. Humans could be simultaneously cooperative and competitive, supportive and judgmental, all while pretending that life wasn't a high-stakes social experiment unfolding in real time. Leadership in this context was less about formal authority and more about perception, cunning, and the ability to navigate drama without being publicly humiliated. By the time the sun had climbed high, early humans understood that the tribe's survival depended as much on subtle politics and ego management as it did on hunting skill, fire mastery, or predator awareness, proving that even in prehistory, the drama never really ended. It just shifted arenas. Even after the chaotic leadership debates and minor ego skirmishes, early humans had to circle back to the one thing that could make or break their day: fire. Maintaining embers was a full-time commitment, a delicate balancing act that demanded attention, patience, and just enough intimidation to convince the flame it should behave. Sparks were finicky, smoke was dramatic, and wind could turn a carefully tended fire into an uncontrollable spectacle in seconds, leaving everyone scrambling like toddlers in a windstorm. Humans hovered, blew gently, poked with sticks, and occasionally cursed under their breath because apparently even fire could sense disrespect and mock clumsy caretakers with unpredictable flares or sudden snuffs. The best firekeepers earned quiet admiration and a subtle social premium, while the incompetent were judged silently or occasionally loudly when flames died, prompting awkward apologies or exaggerated sighs. Fire was both practical and performative. It cooked meat, warded off predators, warmed limbs, and served as a subtle stage for showing off skill without the danger of tripping on roots or embarrassing oneself in a hunt. Embers needed constant monitoring. Too little attention, and they cooled. Too much, and the flames became aggressive, threatening nearby tools, hands, and pride. Humans experimented with layering wood, arranging rocks, and shielding flames from gusts, learning through trial, error, and minor burns, all while maintaining the delicate act of appearing calm and competent in front of the tribe. Some individuals took the opportunity to subtly assert dominance, leaning over embers with exaggerated care, tossing sticks like a conductor, or issuing grunts that communicated both expertise and ownership. Others hovered nervously, offering unhelpful advice or dramatic gasps when a small flare threatened their toes, providing the perfect combination of comic relief and tension. Social dynamics intertwined with practical necessity. The one who kept fire alive effectively commanded a small sphere of authority, while the rest observed, silently ranking skill, patience, and clever improvisation. Even small accidents, sparks leaping onto clothing, or smoke in the eyes, became fodder for gossip and subtle judgment, reinforcing hierarchies in ways that hunting or gathering couldn't. Fire maintenance required focus, dexterity, and situational awareness, yet it was also absurdly performative. The flame's behavior became a mirror reflecting competence, creativity, and temperament. By mid-afternoon, humans had internalized that survival wasn't just about having a fire, but about managing it socially and practically, a constant negotiation between control, attention, and ego. The glow of embers wasn't just warmth, it was validation, a subtle scoreboard of skill, patience, and the ability to thrive amidst chaos. And as smoke curled into the air, carrying faint scent and quiet menace, humans continued their delicate dance, ensuring that the flame persisted, their status remained intact, and that no one could mock their inferno-handling prowess without consequence. After the fire was secure, some humans turned their restless energy toward a curious pursuit that was equal parts creativity and social signaling: decorating cave walls. Painting, scratching, and etching animals, handprints, and mysterious squiggles onto rock surfaces served multiple purposes: storytelling, ritual, practice for hunting, or simply flexing artistic prowess. Because apparently, being able to smear pigment convincingly was an early form of influencer marketing. Tools were rudimentary: sticks, fingers, crushed minerals, but humans treated them with exaggerated seriousness, gesturing dramatically and occasionally muttering approval or critique in their grunted dialect. Mistakes were inevitable: stray lines, uneven shapes, or accidentally knocking over pigment created minor crises, prompting laughter, sighs, or pointed looks from nearby peers, as if the cave itself was a gallery of social commentary. Some humans lingered on composition, arranging shapes in elaborate sequences that might impress hunters, pranksters, or future archaeologists, while others simply slapped pigment haphazardly, producing abstract masterpieces that doubled as social satire. The process became performative. Careful application signaled skill, while bold improvisation demonstrated confidence or mild recklessness, and observers silently graded technique, style, and flair. Humans often compared works, subtly criticizing or feigning admiration, practicing social nuance while simultaneously channeling creative energy that had no immediate survival payoff, but plenty of status implications. Placement mattered too. Painting in a prominent spot communicated boldness and visibility, while hidden corners were safe for experimentation, yet limited the social capital earned. The act also carried risk. Kneeling, stretching, and balancing on uneven floors invited slips, smudges, and dramatic falls, all while still maintaining the appearance of intentionality and grace. Collaboration emerged naturally. One human might hold pigment while another applied it, leading to temporary alliances, minor friction, or playful sabotage when someone decided to smudge a rival's handprint. Colors, textures, and layering techniques reflected experimentation, personality, and subtle one-upmanship, with each mark on the wall acting as both survival rehearsal and social performance. Time in the cave became immersive. Humans lost themselves in the rhythm of application, simultaneously narrating their environment, flexing skill, and negotiating subtle social hierarchies. Even the smallest successes, clean outlines, clever details, or inventive combinations of natural pigments, earned quiet nods, shared laughter, and temporary bragging rights, while failures became cautionary tales whispered for days. By mid-afternoon, cave walls were transformed into a chaotic, vibrant record of human presence, ambition, and absurd creativity, a testament to the fact that early humans weren't just surviving, they were also competing, performing, and leaving subtle, messy evidence that their egos demanded attention even in the absence of Wi-Fi, likes, or polite applause. Artistic ambition in this sense was both survival rehearsal and ego flex, blending necessity, imagination, and relentless social commentary into pigment and rock. By mid-afternoon, even the most competent humans grew restless with their standard collection of sticks and rocks, because apparently evolution doesn't come with an appreciate what you have clause. Boredom, or maybe ambition, sparked experiments in tool upgrades, sharper edges, longer handles, or oddly shaped pieces intended to improve efficiency or simply impress the tribe. Every attempt involved meticulous trial and error, plus a dash of reckless optimism, because smashing one rock against another could either create a functional spearhead or an instant finger casualty. Fingers bled, knuckles bruised, and minor swearing filled the air as humans wrestled with jagged stones, flexible sticks, and the occasional overconfident idea that this will totally work. Socially, these experiments were performative. Successful upgrades earned immediate status, subtle nods, and whispered approval, while spectacular failures provoked side-eye, dramatic sighs, and gossip that could linger like an unwanted scent. The pressure to innovate was constant, stagnation was unacceptable, laziness highly visible, and creativity a key survival metric. Some humans applied patient, methodical effort, chiseling and grinding with deliberate care, while others flailed with wild enthusiasm, producing shapes that looked less like tools and more like abstract sculptures designed to test the tribe's tolerance for chaos. Observers evaluated skill, ingenuity, and risk tolerance, quietly ranking participants based on dexterity, problem-solving, and subtle social cunning, because even in prehistory, performance mattered as much as outcome. Temporary alliances formed spontaneously, as two humans might combine skills, one holding rock steady, the other shaping edges, creating opportunities for collaboration, minor friction, or low-key sabotage when one intentionally misjudged pressure. The materials themselves added drama. Some stones shattered unexpectedly, sticks snapped mid-swing, and the occasional stubborn root required full-body effort, reminding humans that mastery demanded both patience and resilience. By the end of the session, humans had produced a mix of useful, borderline dangerous, and purely decorative tools, all reflecting individual style, skill, and survival intuition. The upgrade process reinforced multiple lessons. Attention to detail mattered, innovation was rewarded, and ego was inseparable from competence. Even minor victories, like producing a sharper edge or a slightly more ergonomic handle, prompted subtle flexing, quiet admiration, or dramatic grins at one's cleverness, cementing the link between creativity, status, and survival. By late afternoon, humans had internalized that tools were more than functional objects. They were statements, performances, and strategic leverage, turning the mundane act of smashing rocks into a complex theater of ingenuity, social dynamics, and occasional chaos. This pursuit of better tools kept the tribe engaged, competitive, and slightly more prepared for the unpredictable absurdity of the rest of the day, proving that even in prehistory, boredom was the mother of innovation, and minor finger casualties. Late afternoon brought humans to a necessary but often grossly underestimated activity, snacking. With hunting and gathering leaving intermittent gaps in immediate sustenance, insects became a surprisingly viable, if socially complicated, option. Some humans approached with gleeful pragmatism, plucking beetles, grasshoppers, and grubs with the sort of excitement usually reserved for dessert, while others wrinkled noses, muttering silently about dignity and long-term self-respect, which apparently could coexist with imminent hunger. The act of eating insects required a mix of dexterity and strategy. Remove wings, crack shells carefully, chew efficiently, and avoid accidental antenna ingestion, all while maintaining the subtle appearance of confidence. Social dynamics flavored every bite. A bold snacker could demonstrate survival skill and resourcefulness, while someone hesitating could inspire mockery or subtle eye rolls from nearby peers. Some humans experimented with preparation, roasting over fire, crushing into mash, or combining with leaves, though results were inconsistent and occasionally pungent, giving the experience a layer of unpredictable comedy. Observation was key. Watching how peers handled their snacks provided insight into social hierarchy, bravery, and problem-solving ability. Even the smallest mistakes, choking, spitting, or dramatic gagging, became communal entertainment, reinforcing bonds through laughter, judgment, and mild horror. Humans quickly learned that insects were not just food, but also a social litmus test. The ability to consume with calm, efficiency, and a hint of pride elevated status, while squeamishness or overreaction subtly marked weakness or inexperience. This snack break often coincided with storytelling or commentary, a chance to narrate minor adventures, exaggerate hunting mishaps, or critique others' choices, blending nourishment with subtle performance. The crunch of shells, occasional surprise flavors, and tactile oddities demanded both attention and resilience, turning the simple act of eating into a minor exercise in dexterity and nerve. By the end of the insect snacking session, humans were simultaneously fueled, slightly queasy, and socially calibrated, having reinforced hierarchy, courage, and creativity through a shared, slightly disgusting experience. Snack breaks, therefore, were not just about calories. They were practice in adaptability, observation, and subtle self-presentation. The lesson was clear. In a world where pride, survival, and comedy collided constantly. Even the lowliest grub could be transformed into both sustenance and social theater, proving that early humans were capable of turning necessity into performance with dramatic flair, minor indignity, and occasional delight. By late afternoon, buzzing, crunchy, and slightly embarrassed, the tribe was fueled for the next round of absurd challenges, fully aware that every bite, gesture, and grimace carried subtle consequences for both survival and reputation. As the day progressed, early humans often embarked on aimless afternoon wanderings, which were less about exploration and more about performing the delicate art of strategic meandering. Moving through forests, plains, or rocky terrain, humans pretended to scout, track, or find resources, though much of the time the actual goal was ambiguous at best, part exercise, part social theater, part mild existential rehearsal. Some wandered with exaggerated focus, squinting at the ground and gesturing at invisible landmarks, signaling competence, while others drifted lazily, muttering under their breath or deliberately stepping in mud to appear rugged and adventurous. Social hierarchies subtly dictated pace. Leaders walked with purposeful strides, while others alternated between catching up and casual floundering, each step a performance of agility, attention, or intentional clumsiness. Observation was constant. Eyes scanned for edible plants, animal tracks, or suspicious shadows, while simultaneously noting who tripped, paused too long, or failed to interpret subtle cues. Missteps were opportunities for gossip, whispered judgment, or dramatic sighs, transforming mundane wandering into a theater of skill, patience, and ego. Humans occasionally staged minor improvisations, crouching behind bushes, pretending to spot distant prey, or gesturing wildly at imagined threats, blending survival rehearsal with performative flair. The terrain ensured unpredictability. Roots, uneven rocks, streams, and hidden holes forced humans to improvise, stumble, and sometimes curse, all while maintaining the delicate veneer of competence. Even the weather contributed drama. Sudden gusts of wind, unexpected sun, or random drops of rain created layers of challenge, making each step simultaneously practical and performative. Temporary mini-adventures emerged, chasing small animals, investigating mysterious sounds, or testing a path that might lead to resources, all with a subtle undertone of low-key competition. Coordination, or lack thereof, subtly reinforced hierarchies. Those who moved gracefully or noticed hazards first earned silent respect, while the clumsy, slow, or inattentive were catalogued for future amusement or gentle correction. Humor often punctuated the trek. Exaggerated reactions to harmless critters, mock tripping, or playful pranks reminded the tribe that even wandering could be socially instructive, entertainment adjacent, and slightly absurd. By late afternoon, humans had blended genuine observation, resource scouting, and social performance into a single, wandering ritual, leaving them tired, alert, and subtly reassessing their own skill and position within the tribe. The lesson was clear. Even aimless walking could carry consequences, entertain, and teach, proving that early humans were simultaneously explorers, performers, and critics in an unpredictable world where every step mattered and every misstep was social currency. By late afternoon, early humans turned their attention to shelter because apparently survival was only marginally useful if you looked ridiculous or froze at night. Simple overhangs, hollowed-out trees, or rudimentary lean-tos required constant attention, adjustment, and occasional dramatic improvisation because even a minor structural flaw could lead to wet bedding, bruised egos, or both. Some humans approach shelter maintenance with methodical care, rearranging sticks, layering leaves, and reinforcing weak points, all while casting subtle judgment at those who did the bare minimum. Others treated it as a creative exercise, building mini fortresses or whimsical structures that were aesthetically questionable but socially entertaining. Collaboration emerged naturally. One human would hold, another would stack, a third might supervise with exaggerated gestures, silently grading skill, effort, and style, because apparently social hierarchy extended to roof construction. Mistakes were inevitable, collapsing walls, slipping on mud, or accidentally destroying someone else's design led to dramatic sighs, laughter, and minor scuffles, reminding everyone that shelter was both functional and performative. Time, skill, and ingenuity were rewarded. Humans who produced stable, dry, and slightly impressive structures earned respect, subtle prestige, and the first choice of prime resting spots, while those who failed earned whispered ridicule or exaggerated eye rolls. Shelter maintenance doubled as rehearsal for future challenges, reinforcing weak points, learning which materials resisted wind, and improvising under minor pressure trained humans in problem solving while subtly communicating competence. Minor accidents, smudged mud, fallen leaves, or misplaced stones added humor, tension, and social commentary, creating an environment where practical skill and performance were inseparably tangled. By late afternoon, the tribe had a patchwork of functional, semi-functional, and creatively absurd shelters, each reflecting both necessity and personality. Humans balanced aesthetics, function, and social optics, demonstrating that even basic survival tasks were arenas for judgment, subtle competition, and quiet flexing of ingenuity. By the time adjustments concluded, the tribe was slightly exhausted, slightly entertained, and fully aware of who had the best building skills, who was reckless, and who would probably sleep in mud puddles. Shelter, in this sense, was not only protection from weather and predators, it was a stage, an ongoing audit of skill, creativity, and social strategy, blending absurdity, utility, and ego in ways that kept humans alert, competitive, and entertained simultaneously. The late afternoon shuffle ensured that by dusk, every human had participated in labor, observation, critique, and performance, proving that even resting required effort, ingenuity, and a subtle understanding of social dynamics. As the sun dipped low, humans gathered near the fire, not just for warmth or cooked meat, but for the grand performance of evening storytelling, a ritual equal parts history lesson, cautionary tale, and dramatic entertainment. Each speaker wielded words like primitive theatrical props, exaggerating hunting victories, hunting disasters, and mundane mishaps to the level of epic legend, because apparently surviving the day wasn't enough. You also had to make it sound impressive. Listeners leaned in, wide-eyed or smirking, parsing details carefully. Which human overreacted, who got injured, who fumbled a spear, and who managed to look heroic despite all odds. Storytelling wasn't passive. Subtle interjections, hand gestures, and knowing glances acted as commentary, critique, and applause all at once. Some humans embellished freely, inventing rivalries, monstrous prey, or near-death escapes, while others practiced restraint, letting dramatic pauses, facial expressions, and strategic glances carry the suspense. Humor and sarcasm were abundant. Someone falling into mud became a legendary anecdote. Someone exaggerating a minor brush with a predator earned both awe and laughter, and everyone silently noted who had the best narrative flair. The fire served as both stage and spotlight, flickering shadows amplifying gestures and lending unearned gravitas to otherwise mundane events. Minor disputes arose over credit, embellishment, or perceived exaggeration. I was clearly closer to the deer, or that mud puddle was way deeper. became heated discussions wrapped in performance art. Even silence was performative. Dramatic pauses, wide-eyed stares, or exaggerated nods communicated judgment, anticipation, or subtle mockery, shaping the storyteller's reputation. Listening skills were as critical as speaking. Those who caught details, critiqued cleverly, or added minor commentary gained social capital, while inattentive or visibly bored humans risked subtle shaming or playful jabs later. Storytelling reinforced group cohesion, teaching survival lessons, subtly establishing hierarchies, and providing comedic relief after a long day of chaos, danger, and competition. By the time night deepened, humans were mentally replaying events, embellishing their own contributions, and preparing for next day's performance, because apparently memory, improvisation, and ego were survival tools just as essential as fire, spear, or shelter. The ritual wove together entertainment, education, and social calibration. Exaggeration was expected, subtle criticism mandatory, and the ability to command attention without formal authority a critical measure of skill. Storytime, in short, was survival theater, a mix of drama, wit, and low-key psychological warfare, leaving the tribe bonded, alert, and fully aware that reputation traveled faster than prey, fire sparks, or mud-smeared hands. By evening's end, humans had practiced narrative, empathy, timing, and strategy simultaneously, proving that even leisure was a socially competitive, absurdly performative, and subtly brutal affair in the life of early humans. As darkness fully claimed the landscape, early humans settled into the delicate art of night vigilance, a mix of survival instinct and subtle social signaling that made sleep a negotiable luxury. Fires were tended, embers coaxed, and shadows scanned, because any lapse could attract predators, rival humans, or just random bad luck, and apparently the universe didn't offer snooze buttons. Some humans maintained strict watch rotations, pacing, listening, and gesturing at every suspicious sound, while others pretended to nap strategically, balancing rest with the appearance of alertness, because subtle deception was apparently an essential life skill. Social hierarchies dictated who monitored closely, who had the privilege of closer-to-fire comfort, and who quietly observed from the edges, cataloging competence, bravery, and occasional sloppiness. Minor tension arose over positioning, who sat near embers, whose sleeping spot got prime protection, and who took too many liberties with exposed areas, prompting gestures, sighs, and silent judgment that could last until dawn. External stimuli kept humans alert. Rustling leaves, distant howls, sudden bird calls, and even minor snaps in the underbrush became dramatic tests of reflex, patience, and nerve, with observers noting reactions and silently ranking performance. Vigilance also served as social theater. Exaggerated scanning, careful gestures, or sudden alarm signals could communicate skill, courage, or subtle dominance, while false alarms offered opportunities for humor, minor mockery, or playful retaliation. Humans quickly realized that night required both strategy and flexibility. Too little attention risked death or injury. Too much led to exhaustion, subtle panic, or unnecessary embarrassment. Even mundane tasks, adjusting a log, reinforcing shelter walls, or tending embers, carried layered significance, signaling diligence, competence, and situational awareness. Stories, whispers, and gentle commentary flowed quietly, reinforcing bonds, hierarchy, and collective memory, while occasional tense laughter relieved stress and reminded humans that absurdity persisted even in danger. By midnight, those on watch had honed instincts, reflexes, and social observation, while the resting humans absorbed lessons in patience, adaptability, and performance without conscious effort. The night, in its quiet unpredictability, tested humans physically, psychologically, and socially, intertwining survival, judgment, and subtle ego management into a continuous exercise that defined competence. Sleep was never simply restorative. It was strategic, social, and occasionally performative, reinforcing the understanding that survival demanded constant negotiation between alertness, endurance, and social awareness. By the final hours before dawn, early humans had internalized that night vigilance was both a literal and figurative spotlight. Every movement, glance, and decision contributed to survival, reputation, and the subtle hierarchy that governed their lives, proving that even in rest, chaos, competition, and absurdity remained inseparable companions of early human existence. As the first hints of light crept over the horizon, early humans emerged from their makeshift shelters, exhausted yet wired, ready to begin the next loop of the day's absurdities with the kind of grim enthusiasm only prehistory could inspire. Morning routines overlapped, checking for predators, inspecting fire remnants, assessing minor injuries, and evaluating the night's social performances, all while silently judging everyone else's competence, courage, and subtle flair. Food was reevaluated. Leftover meat, scavenged roots, or forgotten berries were scrutinized, rationed, and occasionally contested, because apparently hunger and pride were best served together. Tool inspection followed. Sharpened sticks, newly shaped stones, and questionable inventions from yesterday were tested, adjusted, and critiqued in ways that balanced utility with a low-key ego flex. Humans wandered, gathered, and occasionally chased prey, applying lessons from previous failures while navigating the ongoing theater of social dynamics, gossip, and hierarchy. Small skirmishes, subtle collaborations, and minor accidents punctuated the morning, reinforcing the idea that survival was a full contact, socially charged, and endlessly performative sport. Fire was rekindled or maintained, mud masks reapplied, and artistic impulses occasionally resurfaced, blending function, creativity, and social signaling into a chaotic symphony that defined existence. Afternoon wanderings, insect snacks, and shelter adjustments repeated with variations, each session teaching patience, resilience, and the subtle art of balancing personal needs with group expectations. Storytelling in the evening provided catharsis, social calibration, and comedic relief, reinforcing the hierarchy, sharpening observational skills, and offering a rehearsal space for bravery, wit, and dramatic flair. Night brought vigilance once more, fires tended, embers coaxed, and ears strained, with every movement scrutinized by peers, proving that sleep was both essential and negotiable, while alertness doubled as performance. By dawn, humans had absorbed lessons, mistakes, triumphs, and minor humiliations, all integrated into an ongoing loop where survival, ego, and absurdity intertwined seamlessly. Every day was a rehearsal for the next, an endless cycle of hunger, hydration, hunting, gathering, creativity, social theater, and panic, punctuated by mud, smoke, and occasional insects, proving that early human life was less about simple survival and more about navigating a chaotic, absurd, and hilariously judgmental world. Despite the repetition, each day felt distinct. Small accidents, social shifts, minor innovations, and unpredictable nature ensured that no two mornings were identical, keeping humans alert, competitive, and strangely entertained. The absurdity was constant, survival was critical, and reputation mattered as much as raw skill, cementing the understanding that early humans lived in a perpetual loop of action, observation, and low-key drama. And so, as light fully illuminated the landscape, the tribe braced for another full day, proving that human existence, then as now, was simultaneously dangerous, ridiculous, and endlessly performative, an ongoing comedy of errors disguised as survival, with every dawn resetting the stage for the next act.